Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind, a more familiar Wednesday lineup with John Hughes returning to the fold alongside his long-time comrade Patrick McGilp. How are you doing, guys?
Very well, mate. Very well.
It's good
Yeah.
to see you. I've got to say, it's good to see you.
Good to be back. Good to be back. I had a great time. Had a great, fantastic holiday. Best one I've had in a very, very long time. So good to be back. Although Celtic didn't make it easy on me. Only turning it around after I'd returned. My first day out, my very first day out was the Rangers game.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kitted out, cocktail in hand because they're 2 hours ahead. So I'm getting tore in, and yes, no, it wasn't a good afternoon. And apart from that, this moonlight bar, it's a beach bar I was in, had slats, which I thought was shade. Turns out it wasn't shade. So it was a painful afternoon in more ways than one, burnt to a crisp. But hey, look, we are where we are now. All is well in the world.
It is, but I do want to pick up on something you discussed before you went away, John. That turned out to be pretty ominous with regards to removing some of your front or your first picks, replacing them with some of the second stringers, and what that looks like. We now know what it looks like. Mm-hmm. Patrick McGilp, you were with Acsom on Friday night at Gracie's for Jackie McNamara. Some great tales from wee Jackie, wasn't there?
It's brilliant. These nights are always brilliant. I was at Alan Thompson just over a month ago, and that was fantastic as well. And it's great to hear sort of stories from behind the scenes after these guys have retired about, just what made Celtic so successful, what these guys were like in the dressing room. As you say, a few funny tales, stuff that we didn't hear about at the time, and just how Jackie's keeping and what he makes of, the current proper Celtic players. So that was a brilliant night. Brilliant.
It was. And it is great just to see him fighting fit after his brain injury, John. I mean, that was touch and go for a while there.
That's scary stuff, man. Real life, we're in this sort of football bubble, and, it very rarely does it impinge on real life. You know what I mean? We've seen guys, dropping on the pitch and stuff like that. And that's, everyone gets really, really upset because this is your entertainment. This is where you come to escape. This is, even this chat, this podcast, is people come here to escape, talk about Celtic, get away from their real lives. And so when real life comes calling, it's very, very scary stuff. And Jackie's a great fella. And those nights are such a good idea. It was a joy of my life to be able to listen to all those sort of behind-the-scenes stories growing up. Players talking about other players and wee stories about what the manager said and all the rest of it. That's brilliant stuff, invaluable stuff. It makes you feel really connected. So to bring that to the public through all these events, I think is fantastic. And obviously, given the reaction to them, I think everyone else feels the same way as well.
Yeah, it's great. I'm going to give a big shout out to a couple of lads from Cork, John, who turned up on Friday, and they came with a gift. Now, this isn't the first time it's happened, right? Because a couple of Acsom listeners came with a gift previously, which was a beautiful Celtic mug. But not only that, some homemade tablet. Obviously, they know what my vice is. My vice is anything that's sugary. And then this happened again on Friday night. Beautiful T-shirt and badge. So a big shout out to you guys. You know who you are. And I've been speaking to you on the Twitter as well. Fantastic. I love all that kind of stuff. But yeah, you're talking about picking up on stories, John. There's one that just came to mind when you were talking there. And it was the original holy goalie, Big John Fallon, who told me it. And he says that down at Seamill, he said that he would share a room with Ronnie Simpson. Right now, I don't know if that was the same, probably was the same situation away from home, but Seamill Hydro, he would share a room with Ronnie, he said, and all the smokers would come to his room for a fly drag, right? And I think at one point, Jockstein got wind of this, that, I don't know who all the smokers were in the Celtic team, but John Fallon was at that time, and they were all having a quick cigarette. and the big knock on the door. And when they open it, there's Jock, so they're caught. You can't hide the smell of fag reek, right? So that was them caught. They all got a bollocking, and then when Jock's team turned to go away, he goes, that wasn't the worst of it. They then opened the drawer of the cupboard, the wardrobe, and that's where all the pints of lager were. They'd actually got pints of lager from the bar, and they were all lined up, so they were quite happy to take the flak for having a quick ciggy. But they didn't want the big man to know that they were having an afternoon beverage or two.
I was actually listening to my. It was my dad talking on a pod he'd done with St Anthony, Stephen, and it was a while ago now, and he was just talking about how initially at Celtic the training was just like they were just running laps when he was a boy, and around the park, and one end of the park the floodlights weren't all on, it was dark, and two of the boys would just jump in the stand and sit there having a smoke. Do you know what I mean? Until they would join in the laps, and once it's nearly done, just jog on, and so that's how professional it was.
I love all those old tales. I really do. And they spoke about Seymour because there was a patch of grass where they would do their training, but right down the middle, I think Jackie mentioned this as well, Patrick. Right down the middle was a path, so they're actually like flying into slide tackles and all that. And there's a path, John. Right down the middle of the pitch. Unbelievable. Great for the history that Seymour was used, but obviously when you look at the advancement of the football club, it's probably not suitable these days. There's plenty to talk about. I thought there was a great debate yesterday, Patrick, with regards to Spurs and the interest that they are apparently showing in Ange Postecoglou. And Liam gave kind of like mass-sided argument why Ange is going to stay at Celtic. And James gave a very good counter-argument in relation to why he might be interested in a move to a team like Spurs. It's obviously all over the media, and I think we should discuss it now, because I've been looking at some of the stuff Ange is talking about. He's not talking like a man who won't be here next year, Patrick. He's talking about Champions League and what you need to do to improve at that level.
Yeah, I think people are very concerned, obviously, with the links in the papers and how they're not really going away. There's not actually much substance to what's been said. There was an article in The Independent on Thursday morning saying that he's high up on a list of candidates for the job. And then there's another one this morning saying that they're very interested in him, I believe is what they were saying. They're going to step up their interest. So those are the only two concrete, and piece of information that we've got. It's the fact that it's not going away, I think, has got everyone worried. I think you're right. I think, he's talking about the transfer market. He's talking about Champions League next season and how we're going to have to step up and try and perform and do better. I think another thing that's maybe worrying people is the fact that he says he's only focused on the cup final and he's not looking beyond that, which is obviously he's trying to say I'm not thinking about Tottenham without coming out and saying it, but obviously people are thinking I'm not thinking about Celtic either, so I think that's maybe get a few people worried. But I don't think it makes a lot of sense for him to go to Tottenham. That's my personal opinion. I'm not saying that he won't. I just think the club is such a mess. I mean, if their fans demand success, but they're not going to get any because Mourinho has tried and failed. Conte has tried and failed. They spent, vast sums of money. They've got arguably one of the best goal scorers the English top division's ever seen in Harry Kane, and they still can't win anything. I know the big man likes a challenge, but it really is, dire stuff at White Hart Lane. And, I think the Scott Munn link, he's someone he's worked with from the City Group. He's now, I think he's going to become the director of football and sort of Levy's right-hand man. So I think that's maybe a point of concern. That's maybe where the link is coming from, and maybe that might tempt Ange. But I think, without a guarantee of time and money, I'm not sure. I think they could be sort of trigger happy down there as they usually are. And, if he's struggling for the first 2-3 months, I think they could sack him, and that wouldn't work well for anyone.
No, you're right. I mean, John, I spoke yesterday about the fact that, there is temptation. There's always temptation. And even Jock Stein left an American tour in 1970 to hold talks with Manchester United about becoming the new manager at Old Trafford. Martin O'Neill spoke to Leeds United in 2003, just a matter of months before Seville, and actually signed a letter of intent that suggested he would become the Leeds United boss at the end of that campaign. It didn't happen, thankfully, on both counts. But managers are tempted, and you can understand why, John.
Well, I mean, as a lifelong diehard Spurs fan, I did implore my fellow Spurs fans to start a petition for Brendan Rodgers to get the job, obviously. Because, I mean, Ange, as we all know, and we can clip this, but it's definitely not good enough for Spurs. I don't even know why they're thinking about him. Okay. Right. So other than that, let's start again. I'm all over the place with this one, I have to say, because a couple of weeks ago, when this noise first started, I said no chance, and I tweeted out. I said I don't think he's going. These are the reasons, and the reasons were, and this is a bit that will hurt if he does go, because I backed Ange not so much as a manager, obviously as a manager as well, but as a man, as a personality, as the kind of person who's got more about him than just using football as a vehicle to fulfill his personal ambitions. He understands legacy. He truly loves the game. He truly loves football. And because he truly loves football, he does understand the value of legacy. He does understand what it means to build a dynasty. He's seen it done. He grew up with it. So that's his background. And I feel as a man, because he realises that I didn't see him leaving at this point, because that's not what he's done here. And also, I didn't think Spurs were going to appoint someone with no experience in the EPL and very, very limited experience in Europe, and actually no experience in any of the top leagues. So I didn't think that was going to happen. However, it's not going away. They are still talking about it. And when you look at it, the counter-argument, this is what I'm saying, I'm on both sides of this argument, it's terrible. So the counter-argument is my logical head. So you take the Celtic passion out of it, and what I feel for Celtic and what I'm projecting onto him, I suppose. But, he does a good job of, expressing all that himself. But once you finish projecting your own sort of emotions onto the situation, the reality is, I said before, I didn't think he'd go to England anytime soon because he'd only be offered relegation battles, and he's not the man for a relegation battle. This is not a relegation battle. So, they may not be, of course they're a basket case of a club. If they weren't a basket case, chances are they wouldn't be getting offered the job. But would Ange back himself to turn it around? I think he would be conflicted, because obviously Daniel Levy is like Peter Lawwell on steroids. The man's a total control freak. So essentially, does he? I'm sure he backs himself to do the job in terms of the football end of it. But I mean, you can't overcome someone like Levy. I mean, their hand is in all aspects of that club, and he's just going to be interfering, and that's why. I mean, they've been turning down some really, really top-class managers, and other top-class managers have been turning them down. Also, the reality is, and I put out something about this there, I'd heard word from Agent Plan that the Championship in England, or the EFL, or whatever it's called, the second league, they are about to hit 100 grand a week basic wages, right, for players in the second tier. Now, someone did point out to me their second tier is actually the fifth richest league in Europe. But 100 grand in basic for guys in the second tier, and that's a whole other conversation about where Mick Beale does his shopping. But anyway, if that's what you're up against, and I think it was the boys on the Huddle that said, Huddle Breakdown with Alan Morrison there, he said that, I mean, you're looking at, the problem is, this is intergenerational wealth. So Ange has got 2 kids. He's up here and he's maybe getting £1 million a year or whatever. And it's exceptional money for most people. It's unbelievable money. But when you start talking about £4, £5, £6 million a year, that is money that will be passed to your kids and your grandkids and your great grandkids if you manage it properly. That sets your family up for generations. So that you can't ignore that. And it was even pointed out that even if he does go down there, if he signs a 4-year deal or a 5-year deal, he goes down there and gets sacked in 3 months. That payoff will be 75% of his contract, that payoff will be far more than we will actually pay him if he stayed here, for years to come. It would be more. So if it's going to boil down to money, we've not got a prayer. But and this is why I shouldn't. I'm sort of kicking myself, because at the end of the day, I've invested so much in Ange in terms of far more than I have done with any other manager in terms of actual convincing myself. I just think he's a great guy, a great man. But that doesn't mean he's not going to make a decision for the benefit of his family. I mean, you have to think about it. Every single one of us would think about it. And I think that's why he's not been definitive about what's happening next, because I think he's talking to them and I think he's thinking about it. You've got to. I mean, he's got to sit down with his wife and say, look, this will not be probably any good for my football career. I don't think it's going to work out. They're a basket case. Our club could get sacked in 6 months, but we're going to make 20 million quid. And then you could potentially find another job. Or the other thing is, it could go incredibly well. He backs himself and he has, an absolute dream. And he turns the whole thing round and he becomes an absolute legend. So, I don't know, man. I am really, really, really conflicted. And I just don't know. And I am not as blasé about it. I know Lawrence was on yesterday, and Lawrence was saying Celtic's a constant. Celtic goes on. If he goes, he goes. And at the same time, it was St Anthony again up on Twitter posted a picture of Celtic in 1962. And I think it was my dad, and there was three more of them ended up as Lions. But the point of that is, we were getting pumped back then, up until the mid-60s when Jock came. And the bottom line is, the right man at the right time with the right vision can change a club generationally. He can make his mark for decades, potentially, by setting things up and then carrying them on. And, standing in the shoulders of giants, that was a tifo the other day, and that's exactly what that is. So I would not be as casual to say that great managers are interchangeable. I don't believe they are. Is Ange a great manager in that sort of league? Well, obviously not at the moment, but he could be. He could be, and I hope that's what he stays to achieve.
This, John, I think you've touched on something there that is worrying me. You were talking about how you can replace a great manager with a great manager. Right, that's fine. I don't have the confidence in the Celtic board to do that. Now, that might be... People might disagree with this, and I'll explain myself. But before I do that, I'm going to bring in some of the comments coming in from some of the Acsom regulars. And by the way, it's not just the regulars who come up. If you're new to Acsom, make a comment on the YouTube channel or anywhere else on the socials, and we'll see if we can bring you into the conversation. Magnet67 on the YouTube afternoon Acsom team. No way will Ange go to Spurs. Will he? Well, I think that's exactly what most of us are kind of feeling at this present time. Jungle Lion makes the point. Rogers, the so-called Celtic fan, upped sticks at a drop of a hat. Ange has no Celtic connections. Don't be naive to think he wouldn't leave. And we've got Jay McKelvey, apologies, Jay. Kind of worried that Ange hasn't come out like John says. He hasn't definitively said no and said, no, I won't be leaving. He has gone around the houses for me instead of just saying no. Right. So...
Can I just say one thing? Sorry, I just saw Danielle's comment there. Say, why does it feel like I'm being dumped by my boyfriend? I'm going to say, having been dumped a few times, not by boyfriends, but having been dumped a few times in my life, it does feel like the lead up to that, I have to say. So anyway.
You're getting the vibe. Oh, dear. Now, the biggest concern I have, obviously I don't want to lose him, Patrick. I think that he really... Although he wasn't born into a Celtic kind of background or family, I think he gets the other element of what Celtic's about. And I think he understands how important the football club is to so many people. It's not just about a result. It's really not about that. It's about basically, it's an institution for so many people all over the world and for very, very different reasons than just success. And I think that Ange does certainly get it in that respect. But my biggest concern would be if, something does happen and he does decide, like John was saying there, that it's just an offer he can't say no to, right? I don't have the confidence in the board. That's my issue. Now, that was part of the reason when Ange Postecoglou was announced as a manager that I had concerns, not because of Ange, but because I didn't trust the board. I mean, they had gone so far down the line with their first choice. Let's not pretend anything otherwise. They had a first choice, and we didn't get it over the line. So, in terms of actually going out there and scouting a top-class manager, the same type of vision, forward-thinking mentality, and everything that Ange has got, could the board do it? I don't think they could. I mean, look at their track record. I honestly don't think they could do it.
Yeah, it's a concern I've had ever since I began to sort of fall in love with Ange and his way of playing. I thought, this is brilliant, but we've always got to keep our eye on what's next. And ultimately, if a manager does well, he goes to a better club. If he does badly, he gets sacked. So you're always having to keep an eye on who's next and what's coming up. I've been saying for about 18 months, we need to have succession planning. We need to have something in place where, we need to have a manager who can come in and can play a relatively similar brand of football so that we don't need to make wholesale changes in the transfer market. I've quickly drawn up a list, of all the. I'm not kicking Ange out the door yet. I very much want him to stay, but the fact it's not going away, it's obviously something we need to think about, and it's something that obviously the club has to think about at all times as well. And you look at guys like Graham Potter, I think done really well at Brighton, done really well at I think it's Ostersunds. He brought them up a few divisions. I think he's a top coach. Never worked out at Chelsea. Obviously, Brendan Rodgers is a sort of an easy link to make. Former Celtic manager said he would like to come back one day. Allegedly bought a house in Glasgow, out of a job, linked with Spurs and Leeds, right enough. So he could be our saviour by taking the Spurs jobs. You never know. Jesse Marsh, he was linked a few years ago. I don't know how I'd feel about that one. Failing at Liverpool, I was fairly confident with Rodgers, but failing at Leeds, it's a different feeling, I think, and I'm not too sure I would like that. Knutson from Bodo Glimt, I think, would be an interesting one. Obviously, gave us a bit of a shock in Europe, and then Enzo Maresca, the Manchester City assistant, who was linked a few years ago. I think that'd be another interesting one. He totally failed at Parma, so again, not too keen on him. But a few names that I just came up with sort of off the cuff there. James actually tweeted out about an hour or two ago that Potter wants a year out of football, so that sort of rules him out. But I'm again, I'm with you, Paul John. I'm not totally convinced he is off. I don't think it would make a lot of sense. Obviously, it's a top 6 team. There's a lot of money. He'd probably on, as John says, it's close to 10 million a year if he was to leave. But he would need assurances of time and, almost total control. In the Premier League, I don't think you get time. And with Daniel Levy, I don't think you get total control. So unless this Scott Munn character has managed to talk down Daniel Levy and give Ange assurances, maybe there's a conversation there. Obviously, Ange's been coy just now, but I think he has to be. That's just football. But we'll know a lot more by next Wednesday's bulletin. I'm sure. I'm sure it will unravel after the cup final. The truth will come out. But no, I'm not entirely convinced it's a done deal.
Nah. You know the thing as well, John, right? We've all bought into the, and quite rightly so, because they've been sensational for the best part, importing Japanese players over. So that obviously is great for us because they've been successful. But Ange undoubtedly would have to have sold that big time to the players coming over. It's a huge. It's not just a transfer. It's a across the other side of the planet. Maybe not to the European League that they would have chosen as their first, second, or third choice in many cases, John. So, we've got half a dozen players that he's brought over, and he's basically sold them a dream. And I just don't think Ange would then say, all right, see you later, guys. Our paths might cross sometime in the future. I just can't see it happening.
Well, you would like to think not, because it would be a massive wrench, and he's not going to be taking them with him at that level. So, again, comes back to Ange as a man, doesn't it? We're sort of relying on Ange's character here. But, the issues for us, and let's be clear about this, if Ange goes, it's a serious problem for us, I think. And I think it's a serious problem for a couple of reasons. First of all, the reason you said, which is basically Ange was a Hail Mary pass and we were incredibly lucky to get him. And that's one of the reasons why, I think everyone loves him so much. We know we were lucky. It was a fluke. It was an absolute fluke. And it was a Hail Mary after we absolutely bombed on the Howe thing, which was an embarrassment to the club. The way they didn't close that deal and they just let the guy drag it on. It was an absolute embarrassment, which led to some bad feeling, actually, when Ange came in. People jump into conclusions. So, to replace a manager of the quality of Ange with similar quality, I would question really when we've done that before, but again, let's leave that to one side. The specifics are Ange plays in a really, really, really specific way. Yeah. He has bought players to play that way. The reason why we're so good in such a small transfer outlay effectively is because those players fit into that system. So if you've got another guy coming in now saying, by the way, I don't really fancy this, then where does that work? How does that go? Greg Taylor goes back to being, bog standard left back with not enough pace. The midfield is getting overrun because we're too small. All this sort of stuff. Where does that go back to? So you would need to find not just a great manager, up and coming great manager. 57's hardly up and coming, that's Ange, but do you know what I mean? In football terms, he is. But you'd need to find a great manager with an almost identical style, because otherwise it is a root and branch gutting, and we're back to square one. We're not sort of building on strong foundations that we have, which we're hoping to do this summer. It is a root and branch gutting, and we're back to square one. And we'll be talking about, 3-4 years from now, we'll be talking about, oh God, next year we'll do well in Europe. That's not what any of us want. I'm hoping we have the opportunity this summer to build on the solid foundations that Ange has laid, and see really how we can challenge ourselves in Europe. That's what we're all looking for. And the transfer market, potentially if Ange stays, it's exciting stuff because he will be ruthless in terms of getting out guys who are really, really good and hopefully bringing in guys who are next level, guys who we haven't been able to look at before. So I say, we've looked at, I told you just before I went on holiday there, I heard 50 million a couple of times. And, what I heard was 30 million out, 50 million in, roughly. So a net 20 million, which I can believe. That's, with guaranteed Champions League, I think that is believable. It would be more than the board wants to spend or more than they have spent recently, but I think it's believable. And with that sort of money, you can do some damage in the transfer market, I think, at our level. So I'm really, really, really hoping for a positive summer, a positive outcome here on the back of a treble, solid foundations, build for next summer. We've got an exciting tour coming up to Japan. All of it's positive. But he made me very nervous when he didn't say anything after the celebrations. He made me very nervous. So, but look, as I said, I'm all over the show with this. I really want him to stay, but I just, I don't know how that's going to go.
I know there's so many ways you could look at it, John. He's been kind of like setting us up for a long time about don't get too attached to your heroes, and we've been thinking about Kyogo and Matt O'Reilly, etc. Next season, let's have a look at what he said then. Investment alone is not the answer. So he's talking there about the amount of teams that have really invested big bucks, gone into the Champions League and not been a success. He went on to say, by being in the Champions League every year, this is what I thought was positive, because he's planning about next season. Revenues would increase, which gives you an opportunity to then look at a different quality of player, like you say, John. That's got to be the goal next year. This is the positive bit, to be sitting here saying we are a better team. Now, he said that, it was an interview that he gave, I think, to the Daily Record. And for me, that does not sound like the manager who's on his way out the door. There could be so many different reasons why he hasn't, nailed his colours to the mast on this one, and it might be something that I'm looking too much into, Patrick. But I mentioned the fact that Celtic want to make the announcement properly, perhaps. So they've told Ange, just you concentrate on the rest of the campaign, and we'll do it. And it might be, I expect Celtic to make announcements when we're in Japan, for example, when we're in South Korea, maybe around certain players when we're in both of those destinations. And I think that Celtic now are looking at everything as a joined up way of thinking. Okay, it's a great kind of move to get Ange on a long-term deal, or he's going to commit to the club. We don't actually need to do that to sell out season tickets, because as anyone who will know, who has left it to the last minute, like myself today, and who was frantically trying to renew online, and it wasn't working until I realised it was already in my wee checkout box in the top right-hand corner of the screen. They don't offer a deadline on the season tickets, Patrick. We don't need to make a big announcement to sell tickets. We're already at that level, winning the treble. Everybody is buzzing about everything Celtic related. I can't remember a time on a commercial level when we've released so many different items of merchandise, for example, so many kits, Samba trainers, the works. We don't need an Ange announcement for that. What do we need it for? I just think it's one of the things that it will be strategic. And there will be an announcement of sorts. And I've linked that into the meeting that was had up at Celtic Park with Dermot Desmond as well. So I'm going to stick to that side of the fence, John. I can understand why you're so concerned, especially when people make really, really good arguments for the Spurs job and getting into that league and into that frame of earning. Because once you get on that, you can get another job, and you can become extremely wealthy, Patrick. But what would you make out of the statements that he's made there? Do you look at that and say, this is a guy who's planning for next season? He's talking about sitting down here in a year's time, looking back on his Champions League campaign. I see that as a positive.
Yeah, especially the press conference he gave before the Aberdeen game. He was talking about obviously transfer markets, Champions League, whether we're linked with players. You've obviously got the tour of Japan and South Korea as well. That's as much as we have Japanese and South Korean players. Ange came from Japan. That's where the link started. So, I'm not going to say he's going to stay because we've got a couple of friendlies on the other side of the world, but it is just another reason. I thought, as much as it wasn't anything concrete or committal. I thought his speech, I sort of took encouragement from it. He's gone on about how, it's all because of the backroom staff and the players, and, he's talking about we never stop, and it's a famous catchphrase, and I don't know. Obviously, you'd like him to say, I'm actually signing a 3-year deal. I'm binning off Spurs, but can't really do that. But no, I think from what he said, you can't come out and say, no, that's nonsense, that interest, I'm staying at Celtic, because you just don't know what's going to happen. They could offer him 100 million a year the next day, and then he would be off. So I think it's been as encouraging as we're going to get. And as I say, he's definitely here for the cup final. He seems to be planning for next season as well. And nothing's going to happen until Monday morning, I don't think, and we'll know a hell of a lot more in 7 days' time.
Let's hope we don't have to do an emergency broadcast. Now, in a microcosm, there's 2 comments here. These are 2 comments, one from each end of the scale. I'm going to start off with Paddy, because this is a bit positive from Paddy Lavery. Welcome to the show. And just staying, yes, I can buy into that. And then on the other end of the scale, Marco Bastoni, Ange will be gone after the match, mark my words. And that's where we are as a fan base. It's one end of the scale to the next. And yeah, it does show just how much faith we have in the big fella, that it's making Danielle feel as though she's getting dumped. And I think most of us have all had that feeling at one point in our life. Right. Before we talk about next season, and of course Saturday, because we've got a big game coming up, I want to talk a wee bit about the celebrations, guys, because, we see from the other side of the world, big street celebrations from all over the place, be that football in other countries or otherwise. And we've seen exactly the same, John. this weekend. We've seen Celtic fans coming together in their droves. I don't actually know the figure. How many was on the streets? Anybody know how many were on the streets?
It must have been 80,000 to 100,000. I don't know, but it certainly seemed that way.
That's incredible, right? Because I was just, you know, I was thinking about it, and I know certain people might argue the toss on this one, right? But I'm thinking of big gatherings and what is expected from a big gathering, right? What probably isn't expected is that fans of the same club would end up battling in George Square, which didn't happen with Celtic fans. But what would be expected is there would be an element of disorder. With a big gathering of any description, an element of disorder, there would be some arrests. And, you know, listen, I've been to so many music festivals. The cleanup operation is unbelievable. And I know they're organised and it's not an impromptu get-together. So let's look at one that is in London, right? And I'm sure none of the people listening in here were here at the celebration of the coronation, right? How many arrests do you think were made on that day? Because I never really, I had to dig in to find this out. I never seen wide scale outcry over the fact that there were 64 arrests that day, and how much coverage and furore was there? Absolutely none. Celtic fans celebrate in their numbers, John, and there's 10 arrests. That is nothing. It's now. I mean,
No.
I'm not being funny, right? But there's probably more than 10 arrests in the villages where I come from in Fife for disagreements over the darts and the local boozers. For me, they have made a mountain out of a molehill.
Well, how many arrests are there on a Saturday night in Glasgow on a general basis?
Exactly.
You know, I mean, I took a fair amount of criticism for tweeting out some information that I got, because obviously my brother's the ICU consultant, and there was a major incident declared. And then they were told there had been 9 people stabbed. We were saying the whole time that we don't know if it's anything to do with celebrations. It could be anywhere in Glasgow, you know, it could be for any reason. And then it turns out that there was 3 people really seriously injured, and another, you know, the rest of them were all minor incidents. But, you know, that's the way it's declared to the hospital. That's the way the police and the ambulance service are putting it in. And it's all very confused at the time. And I tweeted out what I had, because you wanted people just to stay safe and be on their toes. Turns out, you know, if you're looking at a Saturday night, generally speaking, and actually someone said in the comments under that, you know, on any weekend, like this guy got slashed when he was out in Glasgow, 19 stitches, no mention of it anywhere, because we don't know. We are all blissfully ignorant of the level of these things happening all the time. And they do happen all the time. You know, so, you know, and then when that is twisted to say, oh, there's been some, given how many people were on the streets, it is absolutely farcical to be making an issue out of it. And not only that, what really, really bugs me, and it has been pointed out by a lot of major Celtic accounts, is let us organise something then.
Yep.
You don't let us have it at the stadium. You don't put up any fan zones. There's no toilets. There's no bins. There's no food. There's no nothing going on. You know, you're not trying to control it in any way. And then what? Yeah, you're surprised this happens. I'm almost wondering whether it's just easier for them because they don't have to police it properly. You know what I mean? Because if they had it organised, they would have to say, right, there's going to be 80,000 people here, so we need to provide X number of police officers. Whereas if they just let people congregate in the town centre, they don't do that. So they're not responsible for it. Then they just say, oh, it was terrible disorder. That was awful, wasn't it? Oh, dear. They throw their hands up and don't have to pay anyone any overtime for, you know, actually policing the event properly. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it presents a danger security-wise to our fans, the fact that they don't allow us to organise these things. They know it's going to happen. This was a known fact for weeks and weeks, that this was going to happen. And they don't allow us to do anything about it. They don't prepare for it. They don't put any facilities in place. They don't put any security in place. They don't let us do it ourselves. So, you know, politicians, as usual, speaking out both sides of their mouths, making an issue out of something that is entirely of their own making. Mm-hmm. Because everyone wants to bury their heads in the sand. Nobody wants to take responsibility. Nobody wants to, you know, just get involved and actually take the bull by the horns and say, look, we'll have it here. We'll put up fences around this area. You know, everyone has it here, Glasgow Green or whatever it is. You know, we'll have some music on. Well, actually, How about as a country, you actually celebrate the celebrations? Why are they demonised?
Exactly.
You know, what other country is demonising people who's out celebrating, you know, for their club? You know, you could make the council could make a fortune out of it. You know what I mean? Charge people a fiver in. They'd pay you that just to use the toilets. You know, I mean, it's you know, and instead of taking it, you know, instead of showing some leadership, everyone just walks away from it. And we know the reason why, because they can't stand to celebrate. They can't stand to celebrating to the point where we don't have any tickets to Ibrox anymore. Do you know what I mean? So they can't even stand that. And it's the same people. We know where the likes of Glasgow City Council, you know, I'm not one for conspiracy theories, but, you know, at the end of the day, it's not a conspiracy theory. Yet, you know, actions speak louder than words, and their actions have consistently shown that they are opposed to us in every step of the way, celebrating and enjoying our team because they find that they can't deal with it. So, you know, that's the reality of the situation. We should be, as a nation, we should be saying champions of the you know, the Scottish Premier League. There's going to be a celebration. Isn't that a good thing? Isn't that a good thing? That should be the starting point. Isn't it a good thing? Not all woe is me. There's going to be a ruck. Well, there will be if you don't do anything about it.
John, we went to Seville 20 years ago, right? Most people didn't have a ticket for the game. You see the pictures all over the streets, you know, incredible numbers. There's estimates up to the 80,000 mark of Celtic fans travelling over to Spain. What was the outcome of that? The outcome of that was we won 2 awards, 2 internationally recognised awards for the behaviour of the fans. Now, if you were to look at the facts and the stats and all that, I bet you there was 10 plus arrests in Seville because people having a bevy or getting carried away. That's just the way it is. A very tiny, tiny minority. And what really bugged me was the kind of false equivalence, Patrick, of comparing our celebrations to Rangers' riots from a few years ago. It was almost as if, right, the same old cliche, you know, basically the ugly sisters and all this kind of stuff. Now, I don't want to be associated in any way, shape or form with the Old Firm title for a couple of reasons. There is no Old Firm because the team that was part of that went into liquidation in 2012. But also, this is what happens when you are under one banner, isn't it? They just try and, you know, throw you in with the bad behaviour of the other lot.
Yeah, and I think that's why there's no appetite for a fan zone. Because if they were to host some sort of fan zone, Glasgow City Council in the middle of the town, Rangers fans and, you know, people of that sort of denomination might point the finger and say, "Well, you're favouring that team. This isn't fair. It's all a mad conspiracy." And I think for whatever reason, Glasgow City Council are genuinely afraid of that because we've seen with Angor Amor, there were proposals to put it all throughout the city because of footfall reasons, and I think they were afraid to have a prominent celebration of Irish immigration into Glasgow. It got to the point, I think it was going to be outside of Glasgow Cathedral, just on the waterfront, looking over the river, where the boats would have come in, and still no, there's planning permission in place, and that was about 7 years ago, and still nothing's been built. So they're afraid of taking one side of one of the two ugly sisters, and you know we are not the same. We're completely separate entities. I think that's been clear for years now. There's very little cooperation. You've seen that with the away ticket fiasco. It's not as if the clubs are, you know, cosy and mutually beneficial from this. We're separate entities. And I think, you know, John makes an excellent point. It's easier for what I think are incompetent politicians to just do nothing, not prepare for this as an event. An event which we all knew was going to take place. I mean, we've been running away with the league, and I think in February and March we're talking about gathering in the Tongate again. So we've known this is coming.
Mm-hmm.
There was police, and you know they closed the roads. They had police, not blocking people coming in and out, but just sort of standing there, making sure no cars were getting in. So there was some preparation, but it's easier for them to sort of mal prepare for this event and then point the finger and say, "Oh look, football fans again causing bother." Alison Thewlis, I think, was the first one to suggest it. It's her constituency. She was mainly complaining about, you know, the rubbish and the mess that we'd left behind. I think she needs to take a walk round her constituency because there's rubbish and mess all over Glasgow every single day. And as John says, Sucky Hall Street, 3, 4 in the morning on a Saturday night. You know, we've all seen it ourselves. You know, throwing away kebabs, smash bottles, people fighting. Are we going to send them out a garage and firewater and
Great
nice
shout.
and sleazy or whatever club has all these people in it? I mean, it'd be interesting to see if Glasgow City Council did send them out to Celtic and whether Celtic paid it or not. Because I think if we refused to pay it, I think they'd have a tough time making us pay it because there were so few preparations for an event that we all knew that was going to happen. So I think it's just incompetent politicians keen to point the finger for their own incompetence.
I think to say, Patrick, possibly one of the reasons for the difference in our respective statures is because I've never thrown away a kebab.
I'm still kind of suffering from Friday night's kebab, to be fair. Weebree Luton Town celebrations were televised. Yeah, they were celebrated. That's basically what we're trying to say here. And then, of course, the First Minister, Humza Yousaf, comes in and says elements of the disorder were unacceptable. Right, and he wants clubs to better facilitate the celebration. So, as Patrick says, he wants to get the responsibility away from the authorities and put it back on the club. The Celtic Trust came out, I thought, quite rightly, and called it a bizarre intervention. That's what you were referring to earlier, John.
Yeah.
Requests to create fan zones are consistently knocked back by the councils and the police with very little explanation. So, once again, it's basically, they're football fans equals bad. Riots, hooligans, they're bad, and we can't allow that to happen. And it's an absolute nonsense. And I think it is time for people to step up and question it now. I think, Patrick, you make some brilliant points here in relation to the responsibility, even of the littering aspect of it as well. Any music festival anywhere in the world, you look at a radius of X amount of miles and the amount of littering, or even big football events, big concerts at stadiums. You can't then go to Bruce Springsteen and say, right, here's your bill for that, mate. So you're absolutely spot on. You're spot on what you say. The other thing I want to talk about, not as positive as my last quotes from Ange, is the fact that he seems almost resigned, John. And what he has said a couple of times now is losing one or two in the summer. And we're not talking about Barkas and Ayeti, unfortunately. One or two top players could well be on the way out of the club. Now, we've heard rumours around Abada for a while. We've heard rumours around Matt O'Reilly. He actually came out himself to say how happy he was at the club. Hatate, there's been interest from the EPL. Kyogo, there's interest from the Bundesliga. Any two of those four players is going to be a devastating loss to Celtic, John. Will we have the ambition that Ange spoke about before about taking us to a better level of player to replace them?
Well, we have to have, because we are going to lose those boys. And I think we are going to lose some good players. As I said before, if it's anywhere near 30 million out, 50 million in, sort of way, that 30 million's got to come from somewhere, and it's not going to come from your worst players. It's going to come from a couple of your best players. So we then have to double down on that and do what we're supposed to be doing for you. I don't know how many times I've spoken about this, and every single fan knows it. If you look at all those clubs that use the model properly, and we can all rhyme them off now, use the model properly. When you get the money in for these guys, you don't go back to zero. You don't reset to zero and get the same guy, pay the same amount for the same guy. You step up to the next level. You get a guy from, a bigger league who's got more potential, or he's just a better player. And we are restricted, obviously, by the wages that we can pay. But, if we're putting serious investment into this, with Champions League possibly for the next couple of years, we have to. This is our chance, I think, post-Lobel, with Michael Nicholson there and Ange there. This is our chance to really make a difference. This is our chance to put Celtic on the front foot and not just be a wee parochial club that just keeps resetting and doing well locally. I think we're much more than that. We're much bigger than that. And we can be, if there is the vision and the desire and the implementation of the strategy. The business model they proclaim to have only works one way. If you don't keep resetting to zero, it only works one way. You keep getting better. you know, and you bring players in for a certain amount, you sell them for far more than you bought them, you reinvest that money, nearly all of it, if not all of it, you reinvest that on a better level of player, and so it goes on. And so the cycle, that's how you end up with the Portos and Benfica and all these clubs, you know, who are not huge clubs. You know, clubs are lesser clubs than Celtic, frankly, who have been doing this year in, year out, and been getting Champions League year in, year out. Who is it? Is it a Belgian club that we had Champions League for 5 years on the trot? You know, people are doing this so much better than we are, and yet we proclaim it as our business model. In all the Lowell years, it never was, right? So it only has become now. In reality, we were just giving it lip service before saying that's what we were doing, because it's not what we were doing. So I think now, if we implement that business model, we have a real chance to build on a solid enough squad, a squad that will certainly see us safe domestically. And, you know, can we improve on that? I mean, the opportunity's there, the money's there, the finance is there for the Champions League, the vision is there with Ange. Can we not just go forward?
No, you're right. And you know, we've been talking, John, about the kind of third year drop off. And I don't mean in performance or success, but in terms of that ambition, the third year drop off. And you've seen it with Martin O'Neill when you look at the ambitious signings that we made in season 1 and 2. Where were they in season 3? We have seen it down the years. It obviously was a point of frustration for Brendan Rodgers. Like him or loathe him, he was frustrated by the end because he wasn't getting that backing that he wanted. Listen, you could go right back to the time of the Alliance. We won the European Cup. The two players we signed in the pre-season after winning the European Cup was Patrick McMahon, who was playing junior football, and Chris Shevlin, who had been retired, recently passed away, rest in peace to Chris Shevlin, but he had retired because of a knee injury, John, and Jockstein put him through a medical and got him back playing again. He'd already retired from the game. They were our two sides. Imagine Twitter was kicking around back then. And then the centenary season, we win the double. What do we do after that? We go out and sign Alan Ruff and Ian Andrews. And then during the season, sell McAvenny. So, yeah, we do have a kind of a record there, this Patrick. But I think John's right. The time is now to break that trend, go again and actually strengthen this summer.
Yeah, totally agree. This is why I think we'd all be quite gutted if Ange was to leave, because I think we're in the middle of a project. It's a project that's sort of just been going up recently. Obviously, you've got bumps in the road. You look at maybe Midtjylland, Bodo Glimt, Rangers semi-final defeat. Obviously, there's been moments against Shakhtar this season, could have done better in Europe. There's been bumps in the road, but we are genuinely getting better, and I think we've seen that. It will hopefully be reflected in the form of a treble on Saturday. But, you know, I think that would be the disappointing thing if Ange was to leave, because we do have the manager, a core squad of European quality players, guys like Kyogo, Shota, Hatate, Carter Vickers, Johnston, McGregor. I think we've got a core squad there. We've also got the money. You know, we have tens of millions in the bank. We're going to get another couple of tens of millions, both from season tickets, and Champions League money. As you say, the sort of ongoing commercial revenue, we're going to be releasing 3 strips. Sorry, 2 strips. One has been leaked and already people have bought it. So we've got the money, we've got the manager, we've got the players. We just need to have the vision, and I'm afraid that comes from the top. And it's a constant worry, because in the past, the results we've seen are we sort of go for it for 1 or 2 years. We're on the cusp, and then we just sort of we crumble. Something goes wrong. We find ourselves disappointed, and I hope that doesn't happen this year. As I say, the manager leaving would be a massive interruption to that, and could really offset things, because you're kind of starting from scratch. But you know, I hope that doesn't happen. I hope we can really build and, you know, have European football after Christmas next season, and really kick on, because, you know, we're hopefully going to win a treble on Saturday, but to you know, we've hopefully going to end up with 8 trebles, but we've only got 1 European trophy, 3 European finals. So to do something a bit different, a bit more challenging, mix it up with the sort of the big boys of Europe, I think we need to be bold.
Yeah, and we talk about generational things. 20 years now since Seville, and I know we've reached the last 16 on 3 occasions since then. We've had some really good memories. I know, Patrick, you enjoy an away day from time to time. You and the bold Declan. We have had great memories, but it's something that you do want to progress in, is the European stage. I've got more and more comments coming in. Johnny Ryan, Ange will sign a contract. Believe it. I love your positivity, Johnny. And Giggsy the Poet, aka Kevin Graham, has given us the title of his next poem, Saturday in the Showers, which, listen, I don't care where he gets the contract, as long as he signs it. The Urban Culture. Celtic fans were always going to be demonised, and Phil McGollibin as well. Welcome to the show, Phil. It is almost as if the club formed by Irish immigrants isn't welcome in their own city. Almost, I think it's a great point. And I'll tell you what, it really, for me, when people come out with their responses, John, it just makes it so obvious. Like Patrick was talking there about the Angortamore memorial, which of course eventually ended up down at St Mary's Chapel. Beautiful, beautiful sculpture. But there's problems and the troubles around trying to get that erected in Glasgow. So, it's not about being, having a conspiracy around it or being paranoid. It's not about that, John. The facts are all laid out there for everyone to see.
Yeah, well, as I say, I don't like to fan the flames of these things when there isn't any evidence, but there's plenty of evidence. It's just the way they're treated. I mean, treated even. And no better man than actually Phil McGollivin there, to talk about Angortamore. And it's nice to see Phil contributing. He's a bit of a legend in his own right, reporting on Celtic and the downfall of Rangers. So always welcome. But that very thing, the fact Patrick said you couldn't get it anywhere except in church grounds. And that church is even under attack a lot of the time from, Orange Walks. It's not even safe from that. So let's not pretend that this is a level playing field, and let's not pretend there are not nefarious influences who are directing a public narrative which is anti-Celtic and anti-Celtic fans. Of course there are, because that's their default position. And it's obviously, it really, really helps them deflect from the fact that things like, it was an Orange Walk at the same time that had more than 10 arrests in it. I think there was only a couple of hundred people involved, so it helps them deflect from stuff like that they're allowing through the city, which should never be allowed, stuff that genuinely should never be allowed. And it helps, saying, oh, look, bad Celtic fans did that. Just, it's gaslighting. It's pure gaslighting. It just really helps them deflect from things that they fail to deal with, which are far more serious and far more consequential. And it is, it is the preserve of all politicians to be gutless and lazy and to take no responsibility and only to be leading after the fact. They're all great leaders in hindsight. Nobody wants to take responsibility for anything. And it is just always in hindsight, they're up there saying, oh, that's terrible. Well, it wouldn't have been if you'd done something about it. It wouldn't have been if you'd taken any action. And the girl talking about the leaders, the litter, and her terrible litter in her constituency. Did you put any bins out? Did you put any skips out?
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? Did it come as a complete surprise to you? Were you the only person that was surprised by it? It is utter nonsense. Utter nonsense. And the fact you're going to have that many people and you're not even going to put portaloos out or anything like that, what's going to happen then? It's just, to me, it's infuriating, absolutely infuriating, because it will just keep happening. It could happen again this week. Do you know what I mean? It likely will happen again this week. And what are they going to do about it? Where's the preparations for it? You've just been told. We've just seen it. It's almost certainly going to happen again. So what do you do about it? Absolutely nothing. Just prepare your statement for the Sunday to say, well, that was terrible, wasn't it? Look at all the litter. You're supposed to be leaders in the community.
Proactive.
You're supposed to be representing your community. Do something about it. Stop sitting in your hands and taking, wee political positions based on ideology and what you're told to do, but do nothing for your community. Represent your community first, represent the people first. And by doing that, you prepare for what you know is going to happen.
Yeah, you're right. It's a world record, possibly, if Celtic win this treble at the weekend, Patrick. You know, a world record. And instead of celebrating the fact that a Scottish club are breaking a world record, as John says, they will react rather than be proactive in it as well. Listen, guys, we're just about at the end of the show. I want your predicted 11 for Saturday and a predicted score as well. Patrick, I'll start with you.
Predicted 11. Hart, obviously, in goal. Johnston. Centre half. Starfelt and Awata seems to be the choice. So I'll go for Taylor at left back. I'll go for McGregor, Hatate and O'Reilly, I think, probably. Is Maeda suspended for the cup game? It's just the league he's suspended, isn't it?
Yeah,
right.
he's back.
I'll go for Jota, Maeda, and Kyogo. And I've somehow managed to not mention this in the podcast so far. I hope we beat them 6-0 because it'd be a record in a Scottish Cup and it'd be a joint record for a National Cup final in Britain because they've pulled off one or two shocks against us in this competition and we owe them payback, in my opinion, especially for that handball 8 years ago, which robbed us of a treble. So 6-0.
Like it. I love the confidence. John, are you going to disagree with the starting 11?
The starting 11 is exactly that. No question. In my view, I don't think. I don't think he's bringing Kobayashi back in over the top of Awata now. Otherwise, he'd have played him the last game. To get to the final, they have beaten two Premiership teams: Livingston and Kilmarnock. Kilmarnock who finished 10th. Livingston finished 8th. So, I mean, they are capable of producing a Prem type performance. But at the end of the day, look, my worries evaporated within 5 minutes on Saturday when I saw the intensity return. And what that illustrated was the difference between the 3 previous weeks. And when we turned up, I think I tweeted something out in like 6 minutes saying, boys are on fire today. It was immediate, just that intensity just returned and it was so obvious immediately. And I was incredibly worried that once we'd switched off, we wouldn't be able to switch back on again. Not the case. And, I became unconcerned by this final at that point. I'm not trying to be arrogant about it, but if we play that way that we played on Saturday, I think we'll demolish them. You have to look at the fact that they finished, 6th in the Championship?
Yeah.
So they're hardly setting the heather on fire there. They've had a good wee run in the cup. But if we turn up and play, even as we did on Saturday, not even early season form, but even as we did on Saturday, I think we'll demolish them. I was going to say 5-0. But I am now going to change my mind and I'm going to be copacetic with Patrick there and just agree with him on everything. So we'll go 6-0 and we'll go the same team as well.
Superb, John. I'll tell you what, it's been an absolute pleasure to get you back on the show. You were missed over the last few weeks, and Patrick has always given us a really good balance of opinion as well. Thank you, everybody, for getting involved. 850 strong on the live stream. We are pushing for wee Jamie Tierney, who, he's on a wee journey, and hopefully we can help him along. His family needs 60 grand a year just to give him treatment for a terrible, terrible condition that, unfortunately, in this country, you don't get the treatment, and there is no cure. So we want to help him with the quality of his life. And I think the Acsom community can step up and do that. So if you do feel as though you're able to contribute to that in any way, there is a link underneath this video. So please do. And we'll tell you far more about that as the weeks and months go on as well. All that's left for me to say, John Hughes, Patrick McGill, thank you once again for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Hail, hail.